We got Gators breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Got a kind of annual episode we do every year when the Athlon magazine gets out. My good friend Braden Gall will hop on right here and join me. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss Florida. We'll discuss the SEC, all that good stuff when the Athlon magazine gets released. Braden helping him out right there, so he's going to help us out right here on this episode of Gators Breakdown. So everybody hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Those likes really help us out on YouTube. Subscribe right here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. And before we get going, one more time, the reminder, July 27th, Independent Gator Media Day. Myself with Gators Breakdown, Stadium and Gale, High Top Sports, we're all getting together. Presented by the Sachs Law Group, July 27th in Gainesville, 1 p.m. at First Magnitude Brewing. $25 for tickets there. Reach out to us if you want to help sponsor the event. Should be a fun time there in Gainesville. So, all right, let's get back to it. Braden, what's up, man?
Hey, how you doing, bud? Good to see you.
You too, you too. Hopped on your show not long ago. We're talking, deep dive into the Florida Gators, and we'll do a little dive here as well. But with the magazine, of course, we can zoom out and with the SEC. But Braden Gall right here, Athlon Sports, 440 Sports as well. You can check him out right there. So, Braden, any summertime plans before you get to the big deep dive into football?
So it's the first time I think since like Tim Tebow played football that I will not be going to SEC Media Days. My wife's 40th birthday and the family vacation. The wife's 40th birthday is a much bigger deal than going to Atlanta to talk to some players. So we're driving up to do some adventure stuff in West Virginia. New River Gorge, like it's supposed to be awesome up there. So going to go do some rafting and some hiking and some climbing and some mountain biking and stuff with the kids. So I will not. Sadly I will miss you and everyone else in Atlanta coming up in a few weeks. But got to keep the wife happy. So.
Hey, I'm in the same boat. We were in Jamaica that week as well.
Nice.
So it is keeping the wife, like you said, we put our wives through hell in August through December. Believe me, I know it. So
yeah,
it's summertime and vacation. And as soon as we booked it with some friends. I was like, you know what? That's probably going to be SEC Media Day week.
And I don't know about you. I think Atlanta, and we got to talk football here, but I think Atlanta is one of the most underrated food cities in the entire Southeast.
I've always enjoyed it.
I love the food. I love the culture in Atlanta. I think it's great, and so I do miss that part of it. But I did some work back at the College Football Hall of Fame in 2014. When we were hosting sort of shows with like former SEC great players and stuff, and we were hosting like we did like a live commentary with whatever SEC game of the week was going on SEC Network, and it was such a cool place to be. It's a great venue, but like where the hotel happens is like so far away from everything, and then it's just like it. And the only thing, it's not that much different than Hoover or Nashville or Dallas. Like you're inside in a ballroom for 12 hours, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I want a beer and some food. Where am I going to go?
It usually is a fun time, but you said each city has their unique flavor to it, and having the Hall of Fame there was always cool. But as you said, it's a lot of walking back and forth from that hotel to the Hall of Fame. So all that good stuff right there. So I'll miss you in Atlanta, or I won't be there either.
Yeah, I guess I'll just send you a text message from like from the whitewater rafting, and you can send me a text message from like the white sand beaches, and we'll just be like, "What's everybody else doing?"
That's the plan. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Braden, here we go. Athlon magazine right here.
Yeah. There we go.
So had to find it on the where did I get it at? Publix. There we go. Yeah. Publix.
Hey, look, this is not me pandering, okay? But I am way bigger fan of the multinational Florida grocery store in my neighborhood than the multinational Ohio grocery store in my neighborhood, okay? I'm just going to say SEC all the way.
Publix usually helps us out with those magazines still down here in Florida. So, hey, but thinking about it, it's been a few years since there's been this much good to discuss with Florida in the Athlon Preview magazine. Look, just in general, of course, we've been talking about Florida a good bit, but it's amazing to see that we now have so much good to talk about with Florida.
I think it's amazing. Well, so I was on this show and basically every other show on the internet last summer, and it's kind of like a cheeky line, to say, hey, I think Billy Napier's closer to a contract extension than he is getting fired. That was more than just the situation on the field and the team. There's other circumstances that were involved in that prediction by me. But my point is that by like week 5 or week 6, I was getting a lot. I think I actually did get like cold takes exposed on those opinions, and everyone was like, look how terrible and look how much of an idiot this guy is, and like, oh, he thinks Billy Napier's getting a contract extension. It was a little tongue in cheek. It wasn't meant to be like specific. That I just thought that he was closer to having a good season than getting fired. As that season went along, that opinion changed real fast, and I think the way that the defense played and the way I was at the Tennessee game, so to watch Lagway come in, even though it was by force at that point, you could just see things run differently with him running the offense, and it's not a knock on Mertz. I think he was a fine player. Lagway is a special talent, and so you could see it happen in real time, and I think we'll get to where we have him ranked. And I think your optimism around this team from the outside looking in, it might vary from person to person, but you can't argue that they weren't beating playoff caliber teams with a balanced approach, and that the young talent was doing its job, and that the patience and the investment did actually pay off. Now, is it going to pay off again? That's what we're going to enjoy this fall. But I'm a big proponent of investment and patience, even at the big programs that expect championships right away. And we've seen Florida, Georgia, Alabama, the championships come quickly, right? And then before year 3 for a lot of these coaches, Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, et cetera. And so I think this year is just an enormous year to figure out what the future is going to hold, because I really don't think anyone knows which direction we're going to go on this. But I mean, if it goes the right way, all the expectations are very, very high, and I think playoff is absolutely what Florida should be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I remember having you on last year, and it was a kind of maybe not a scream, but a mention of patience. And hey, look, after this, with the way the season started, it was almost a foregone conclusion after those big losses to Miami and Texas A&M that there's no way Billy Napier survives this. They decide to hang on to him, and there you go. Florida beats, as you mentioned, the playoff caliber teams in LSU and Ole Miss and puts a 4-game winning streak together. So the patience ended up winning out, but like you said, with that comes the expectation that has to carry over. Brett, how much, with you and others there, how much do you think that end of season, how much do you apply to that? How much do you apply that end of season to the expectation of this year? And I guess, pairing that with Billy Napier, the head coach, DJ Lagway, all that stuff that comes together for a prediction at Florida. How much can you look back on last year?
I think you have to, and it's not just about Lagway. I think Lagway gets all the headlines, and rightly so. He's an extraordinary talent, and if he's fully healthy, this team can beat almost anybody, because I think he is, like our anonymous coaching scouting reports that's in the magazine. I mean, the opinions of DJ Lagway by other coaches in the SEC, not us, not fans, not the Florida coaching staff, are that he could be on par with Arch Manning as the best in the conference. And that's pretty high praise for a league that's got Garrett Nussmeier and Lenore Sellers and a bunch of other really talented players that I'm sure I'm leaving out. And so the team will go as far as he goes in terms of development. And so while I don't want to say, oh, it's just about DJ Lagway and how far he goes and is he fully healthy and will he stay healthy, and those are all very real and important questions, the reason you buy into this team as more than just, all right, they're taking a step forward, and the reason we put them in the top 12 and say, hey, this is a playoff team, is because the defense got they showed just as much progress as the quarterback position did from an upside perspective. And so when you see the talent and you see things that start to look like old Florida happening in the secondary, some of those games, by the way, it's not like they weren't, they could have lost a couple of those games. I mean, it's not like they were winning, 55-10 or whatever. So you learn how to win. You show depth and balance on defense in particular, some talent that looks a little bit more like what Florida's expecting at those positions in particular. And then you let your star freshman take the reins. Again, not anybody's choice. Halfway through, 2/3 of the way through the season, and he's clearly the guy. I mean, this is what college football used to be about. Like you see a team struggle in the first half of the season. The freshman quarterback and the young talent on the defense develops. The coaching staff comes together, and all of a sudden they have progress and momentum going into the offseason, and now they're projected to be higher the next year. That's the way college football used to be analyzed. And so it's kind of an old school build and an old school like sort of view of progress from year to year.
Braden, that really takes us to the next point here. And to me, it's fascinating. And I've discussed this a lot in recent episodes and stuff. And it's cohesion and continuity, and then the other side of it because of the transfer portal. And I think there's a big time debate, and I've heard you on your show talk about this, so I know your perspective already from this, but I want Gator Nation to hear it because, believe me, on Gators Breakdown Plus and the Discord, we have these conversations. And I know as soon as Florida fans see the ranking and they see LSU, where they're ranked compared to Florida. Because believe me, it is. In conversations I've had, it is a debate. Florida, LSU. Florida finally gets the win over LSU last year. And that is a debate. Florida or LSU. But not so much for you guys at Athlon. You know, I've looked at it as which program can catch Georgia, Texas, Alabama. And LSU comes in 7th in the top 25 for you guys. One spot ahead of Alabama at 8. Florida comes in at 11 and 5th in the SEC. When what we've talked about with Florida so far in knowing what to like, is it as simple, or maybe this is a starting point, is it as simple as Brian Kelly versus Billy Napier? Is that the divide there, or is there more to it?
I think there's way more to it, but that's a great question, and now I think it's hard. This is going to be a very interesting answer. I think I personally don't view the gap between Brian Kelly and Billy Napier to be that large. I personally don't. I think the experts and the people in this field that do this for a living, that study these things and talk to folks around programs all over the country, probably have a slightly lower view of Brian Kelly than probably the national average casual fan who sees the resume and the winningest record in the history of Notre Dame football and some of the accomplishments even at LSU, which is a division title and a Heisman Trophy, etc. I don't think there's as big a gap between the two as people realize. Is Brian Kelly far more accomplished and has proven more at a higher level? Like, of course, but at the same time, I don't think that gap is as large. I think it's one of the things that I noticed about doing these rankings, and I think the top 8, and we can get into this if you want to. I think there's a top tier of teams in this country that are probably between 7 or 9. I would say 8, and then I think honestly, like 10 through 30, maybe 10 through 35, are all very, very similar. And I say that to say that the gap between 7 and 11 is very, very small. So if you wanted to say LSU has slightly more talent overall, I think that's fair. To your point, I might give a slight edge to Brian Kelly over Billy Napier, but I don't think the gap's as large as I think probably LSU fans or the average national college football fan probably would think. Certainly the result last year would indicate such. Garrett Nussmeier, a little bit more experience than Lagway, the health thing. So, and again, he could be perfectly fine and perfectly healthy, and that's not even a consideration this fall, but we just don't know. I think that there's just more question marks about proving it on this level. Brian Kelly has proven it more on this level. The roster has proven it a little bit more on this level. The quarterback has proven it a little bit more on this. There's just fewer question marks around LSU. And then, of course, the schedule. That's really the thing that is starting to define SEC predictions for us in the magazine. Oklahoma's schedule, Florida's schedule. There's a couple schedules that are just worse than everybody else's. And if you have like that 4th game or that 5th game against top 15 competition, I think last year they had 7 again in the top 25, the Florida Gators. Oklahoma's very similar, if not worse. That's different than Missouri's schedule. That's different than Tennessee's schedule. That's different than even Texas's schedule. So I think there's the scheduling differentials now with 16 teams and no divisions. Like the gaps are a little bit larger between the easy, quote unquote, easy schedules and the bad schedules. So I think if you have just a slight edge, if you think LSU is just a tiny bit better at a few positions in a few areas, and then you add to it They just have a few more winnable games because all you need is one. All you need is one more winnable game to be at 10-2 versus 9-3. 9-3 may be out. 10-2 is probably in. And that could be the difference between 7 and 11. And so, I mean, we're talking about a play or 2 or 3 throughout the course of the season that could separate these two teams.
Yeah, it probably should be for your guys' rankings. You do because it's kind of a prediction for how the season will play out. So it's not really a power ranking.
No, it's not. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. We are looking at trying to predict where the rankings are going to finish at the end of the year. That's what we're trying to do. And I know that's like a tiny, subtle tweak between like what the AP does, for example, or what we even do at SEC Media Days where we rank. I mean, I guess actually what we do at Media Days is probably closer to trying to pick the actual order.
Predicted order of finish, yeah.
But you've been to that event enough. Like, I know all the people that are voting in that stuff. Like, you know, half those men and women are like working for a recruiting site in Fayetteville or something, and they're going to vote for Arkansas. And so it's like, I do think that our goal is to try to say, all right, this team, we think they're this good. And then when we look at the schedule and start doing, because everything changes our rankings, right? Like we have a set ranking coming out of the championship game in the playoff. We have it set and organized. And this is maybe, I guess, a peek behind the curtain a little bit. You have the ranking set 1 through 136. And then as portal moves and roster changes happen and coaching changes happen, you adjust, right? Okay, well, the offense we thought was here, now the offense is here, or it's up here. Oh, they just added this guy, they just lost this guy. And it's just constant change. It's constant moving around. And then you start to look at the schedule relative to where we think these teams are going to be. All of a sudden, if we think Auburn is much better, a road trip to Auburn is more of a swing game than it was maybe a win. And so it's a process for like months. And honestly, I think I can't remember the actual date where we had to submit the rankings finalized, but it was like a Sunday. And we had to have it in by Sunday night so that Monday morning they could start printing the magazine. And I think me and the other guy that works on this, Stephen Lassen, we were emailing on Sunday about Florida. Like, because we were just like, all right, because I'd said, man, I've been told, I think he's going to be fully healthy. And if some blah, 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 blah. And so, like, do we want to stick with them at 11 and in that top 12 and ahead of South Carolina if we believe he's going to be fully healthy? If he's not, we're going to, like, truly, like, 12, 13, 14. Maybe out of the playoff, but like still, we still like the team. There's no way to predict how many games he's going to play. Yeah, there's just it's impossible. And honestly, for any of these teams, South Carolina, LSU with Nussmeier, Sellers, like you can't predict injuries. Right. Like you can't. And so we have to sort of look at it and say, all right, assuming everybody is at their best self with some standard levels of injury, right? Like we know every team's going to have some injury factor. Who do we like better? Who do we trust? Who do we think's better? Who do we think's going to finish in that slot? And so we settled on Florida ahead of South Carolina at 5 in the SEC, Alabama at 4, LSU at 3. But again, that's 7, 8, and 11 with South Carolina at 12. I mean, we're talking 4 teams within 5 slots. Like basically identical is what we think of those teams.
Yeah, I'm glad. It's like you read my mind. I mean, it's like we've done this before. You hit on you hit on a lot of points I was going to hit on right there. Like the impact of Lagway and South Carolina being there. Part of going back to the Florida LSU thing, and let's expand that to even Miami as well. Because if you look at the transfer portal rankings, LSU and Miami are at the top of it. So to me, why it's so polarizing for Florida against those schools is Florida decided to go cohesion and continuity route. It was, we're going to retain our roster. We're going to bring 4 or 5 offensive linemen back. We're going to bring Tyreek Sapp and Caleb Banks back. We don't want to have to hit the transfer portal. Meanwhile, LSU, and look, to me, this is all about catching those elite SEC teams. LSU's route was, all right, let's go heavy transfer portal. There was some criticism about how they used the transfer portal before, and I doubt that's a pure reaction of why they decided to do this, but they had to go hit offensive line. They had to hit wide receiver there and try to take that next step. So to me, they play each other so early in the season. It's going to be a fascinating storyline of continuity and cohesion versus LSU, who decided to go heavy transfer portal.
Well, and I didn't say this earlier, but I think year number 2 with Blake Barker as the defensive coordinator versus year number 1 kind of for Florida with their switch. I guess it's kind of technically year number 2, but like that's another element of this. I might lean slightly more trustworthiness into that defensive coaching staff for LSU than for Florida. But again, we're talking razor thin margins here. You got to figure out, you got to pick something that makes you feel like this one thing is a little bit easier and a little bit better. And like, we could talk about Miami because I would love to talk about Miami. I think of all the rankings in our magazine, and I am not offending anybody who worked on the rankings with me, I think we are the most wrong about Miami. I'm the one in the room that was like, Miami, way too high on this list. I don't trust the coaching staff unless he's like truly just going to be a CEO. Unless he's going to be like a CEO of the team and not be involved in the game day decision making. And the quarterback who is even throwing a football until camp, and even when he is perfectly healthy, which
Miami
I think,
number 10, by the way.
Yeah, Miami's number 10, one spot ahead of Florida. I think I have them more in like the 18, 19, 20 range, which still could be ACC championship game good. They still could be in the ACC championship game. And there's nobody with more talent than them other than Clemson in the ACC. But trusting, like they had, I cover the Titans here in Nashville, and I've seen Cam Ward up close and personally now a few weeks. I'm about to head out there. This is mini camp. I'm starting to date the pod here, but he is extraordinary, and the talent they had around him on offense was really good. And I know they've brought in a bunch of pieces, but I don't trust the coach to do, like, they still lost games in insane fashion last year. And they should have lost the Cal game in insane fashion. Like, they should have lost more games. Virginia Tech. So I don't trust Miami at all. I trust Florida, South Carolina, LSU. I trust all those programs in that same range more than I trust Miami. So sorry, I feel like this is a safe space to rip on Miami.
It absolutely is. You get garner some fans there.
What are we talking about? No,
it was just like Florida playing both LSU, Miami early in the season, and continuity, cohesion versus heavy transfer portal.
I think LSU's a little more of a blend of the cohesion and the transfer than Miami is. I think Miami is the example of like, let's go buy some players, let's try to win. I think what Florida has done is, and I don't know if this is on purpose or this is just sort of the way Billy Napier is wired. My guess is probably a little bit of both. And that is the thing that everyone should be learning in this process from watching Ohio State and Michigan the last 2 years win the national title is about continuity. It is about paying to retain your best players, not necessarily paying to go hire mercenaries out of the portal to come fill a need. You should do that too in select circumstances when it's the right player at the right position of need, and I think you have to do it. Everybody that played in the playoff in the Final Four or whatever, they lost 25 players in the portal, and they brought in like 10 or 12, but those 10 or 12 were high-level 4-star guys that were proven commodities. So I think you do that. But the thing that Ohio State, Michigan did, and Penn State's doing it this year, I think Florida's doing it on kind of a tier down in terms of the national rankings, is retain your talent. Keep your core together. Keep your group together and let them grow together. And that used to be just the way college football worked.
Right.
And now it's, well, no, the NFL was a better option. Well, now it's maybe not. Like, staying together is worth the money. It's worth it for a football team to do that. And so I think it also, this is where it's perfect. Like, you also don't want to be fake. You want to be authentic. Yeah. And it also fits into Billy Napier's MO and how he has built built Louisiana and now building Florida. So the teams that are there at, like, back to my point about like 10 through 35 or 40, we have Miami, Florida, and South Carolina because of, like, those are the ones that have the best combination of all that stuff. And if you look at the teams after that, there's a lot of teams that have a lot of talent. I think I'm very high on Kansas State. Illinois is in there. Michigan's in there. These are good teams, good players. But like, I trust Florida, South Carolina personally, not Miami, but I got to walk the company line here. And so like those two, to me, combination of coach, stability, talent, building, progress, all that stuff, and success. Like, look at South Carolina and Florida and the way they finished the season last year. There's nobody in the they were playing as well as anybody in America at the end of last season, both those teams. So and they've kept a lot of their pieces together. South Carolina lost a lot of players on defense, but I think they've recruited better than, like, their talent stepping in is a little bit more talented, a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, but inexperienced. So their schedule is what sets them up. Like, their first 5 or 6 games, like, they should be undefeated. Their schedule in the back half is tough, but so that's what you have to weigh all this stuff, and you have to figure out, like, all right, who do I trust, who do I like? But the retention, and I do think LSU is more of that than Miami is.
Yep.
Alabama's more of that than both of them. And so the reason Alabama's one spot behind LSU is exclusively the quarterback. Like Garrett Nussmeier is, one of the top 5, top 10 picks in next year's draft. And
more proven.
Exactly. And I actually think Alabama's offense is going to be more of what Kalen DeBoer wants it to be this year, because he has more plays that are accessible to him this year. If Ty Simpson is the quarterback, if he is good, they can attack areas of the field that they simply could not attack with Jalen Milroe. Now, Milroe obviously brings other things to the table.
Yep.
But it's eventually you got to go on sort of like, what do we know? What do we trust? And what questions do we trust to get answered? Which questions do we feel really uncomfortable about? And I think there is an element of, and I think South Carolina's in the same boat here. Florida and South Carolina, you look at them and you go, just haven't seen it yet. Just haven't seen it yet on a national championship, like ever for South Carolina.
Right. Yeah.
Ever, forever, ever. Like never. As much as we all love the follically challenged Connor Shaw, like they just have never shown us that they can do what we think they might be able to do this year. And I think there's a trust factor with Florida and with talent and with this that's maybe, both quarterbacks could be spectacular. So it's like it's going to be. I just keep talking about this stuff with people, and I'm like, man, it's going to be an awesome year in the conference because, like, truly, like team 3, I feel pretty good about the top 2.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if it's not Texas and Georgia, but 3 through Missouri, like at 12 or 13, like it is as balanced as I can remember in this conference.
Braden, you teased it a while ago. Anonymous coaches. So scouting the Gators. Let's get into it. Some of it we already discussed here, but quote, if DJ Lagway continues to develop and stay healthy, they're going to continue to improve. They don't have a killer at receiver, but they're solid at running back. Defensively, they're young, but they've finally got some guys in there that look elite. This is a massive year for Billy Napier. He survived because of the changing politics of the game and his buyout, but it ended up working out last season. Now he can show positive momentum with this group and start competing for the postseason. Lagway and that offensive line are legit enough to bring back a true Florida offense. If they can't be in the hunt for a playoff bid and start scoring points like those old Gator programs, I think he'll be off the hot seat for a while. Lagway could compete with Arch Manning for best quarterback in the league. So what kind of stands out most from that? Some of that you've already hit on. Some of it going back to last year and the new look of trying to save money and save that money for roster construction instead of buyouts over and over again. The one I think that might change. Now, this is some orange and blue glasses. They don't have a killer at receiver. I think by the time we get to the end of the season, that might change.
Well, that's college football. South Carolina would say the same thing about their linebackers, right? Like they lost everybody at linebacker and in their second and in their front seven, and they might. So there's 2 different ways to look at the scouting reports. No, well, let's start with how the major trends here with these. It used to be very scheme and personnel oriented over the years when we were doing this, and it is very much shifted to culture, identity, resources, administration, structure, infrastructure, and it makes sense because you and I know less about these teams at this stage of the season than ever before. Yeah. The coaching staffs know less about their own teams at this stage of the season than ever before. They know less about their opponents at this stage of the season than ever before. And all the players are far more different across the league, more so than ever before. And so it's reasonable for coaches to sort of gravitate towards, well, what is the stuff that is consistent? And what's the stuff that we hear about and that we talk about in our little gossipy, middle school coaching circles? And it's a lot about culture and resources and infrastructure. And so there's 2 ways to look at these. Number one, you can kind of football nerd out about stuff, and you can kind of say, all right, well, yeah, the receiving core is interesting. Oh, he could be as good as Arch Manning, DJ Lagway. The defense finally has some guys that look elite. Like, that's football stuff, right? But I find myself gravitating towards the really, like, nerdy stuff, which is Billy Napier could be, like, the story, the defining story of how a major college football program was sort of, I don't want to say forced to be patient, but there was some elements where they just kind of needed to stay the course for a variety of reasons. Patience and investment, as we talked about. And that just, like, I'd love to know how many Florida fans week 4, week 5 saw the last 4 games coming. I want truth serum every Florida fan to say, oh yeah, we're going to win all 4 of those games. Yeah, we're going to beat our rivals. Yeah, we're going to do that. Like I guarantee you most fans were like, this is not going anywhere. What are we doing? Why are we sitting on our hands, right?
Yeah.
And it's to me it is a case study because there's lots of case studies at places like Kentucky. Like Mark Stoops' first few seasons, not very good. Program was in shambles. Athletic department needed investment across the board. All their programs, women's basketball, everything needed support and resources. Stoops kind of built it slowly, and with patience and investment, all of a sudden they've got a swanky new stadium, and they're having the best seasons in Kentucky history, and that football program has now elevated the rest of their athletic department based on revenues and success. Now, regardless of how it's going to end, I don't know how it's going to end in Lexington, but it's one thing to do that at Kentucky because you can with the fans. They're not demanding a national championship at Kentucky. So that's always been the case. That's always been the strategy decision a program like Kentucky has to make. Are we going to slow build? Are we going to stay committed to our person, to our strategy, to the vision, give it the resources it needs to let it flourish, and let's see what happens? That doesn't happen at Ohio State, at Alabama, at Texas, at Florida, at Georgia. It just doesn't happen that way. And so that's where this is interesting to me because it's an experiment in that strategy, but at a much higher level with higher expectations. And so that's where I'm sort of like, I can't wait to see what Florida's going to be this year. Because if they are good, it is a proof of concept for this strategy to work at a higher level. And I don't know if that's, like, I guarantee you athletic directors around the country are studying what happens with Florida, for sure.
Interesting there. Braden, we talked about the schedule, of course. Braden Gall right here from Athlon, joining us right here. 440 Sports up there in Nashville as well. We talked about the schedule a bit and how tough it is. So what game, maybe this is the same answer, but what game are you most looking forward to for Florida this year? Or maybe even which game defines Florida this year? And let me extend it a bit too. Will you be shocked, surprised, however you want to define that, if Florida beats Georgia this year?
I mean, based today in June on the state of the rosters and sort of where they're at, this is a simple, no, I wouldn't be surprised. Yes, they can compete. Is this the best Florida has been under Napier in 5 years at this stage of the season? Factually, yes. Right? Is this the most questions factually Georgia has had in that exact same span at this time of the year? Factually, I would say yes. So on that alone, that dynamic alone, it's hard to argue that these two are not as close as they've been in years. Now,
games supposed to be played.
and like, could all the questions about Florida get answered the wrong direction? Mm-hmm. And by the time they get to November, they're not the team that was winning the way it was last year. Quarterback's maybe not healthy. Could Georgia does Georgia have very talented options to fill in for all those departed players in the NFL draft? And they're probably going to be pretty good at football. Like, probably. Is Gunnar Stockton, I think he was treated as like a walk-on. He was just, he's a walk-on. He's just been thrown out there, and he's gritty, and he runs real hard, and he loses his helmet. It's like, no, this is a 4-star kid coming out of high school. Very talented player. So I actually think that Georgia's going to be fine at quarterback. I think the rest of the offense, we got to figure out what it is. I think defensively, Georgia has less depth than ever before. It doesn't mean they still don't have the best coaching staff and the best roster maybe in the country. So you kind of have to give them, they're sort of like a Georgia, it's a tax refund. Like it's not a tax. It's like the opposite of a tax.
Yeah. No, and I get it because there'll be some questions around them, and people are like, wow, they got these questions, they got that question. I'm like, put your team in their shoes. You would give your own team the benefit of the doubt. If you had the exact same recent resume as Georgia and that staff, you would give yourself the benefit of the doubt.
I think there's this weird like hipster college football media scheme nerds have like a lot of trouble with like Mike Bobo and Georgia's offense. Mm-hmm. But like outside, but the production has always been there. Even his first stint in Georgia a few years ago, Like they were averaging. This is back when over 7 yards a play was a big deal. Like now, Ole Miss is at like 9 yards a play, but like over 7 yards a play was a big deal in college football back in like 2015, 16, 17 or whatever. And before he went to Colorado State as the head coach, and he was the OC. Georgia fans have famously picked on Mike Bobo forever.
Yep.
But like his offenses were among the 4 or 5 or 10 most efficient offenses in the country there for the last like 2 or 3 years he was there. It's why he got the job. So like, do I think he's as innovative as Todd Monken and like as good as Georgia fans like to defend and who do like him and say, oh, what are you talking about? We can win the Natty. Like, I don't think he's that good, but I also don't think he's as bad as, and I have a lot of friends in the media who are like, God, when are they going to innovate? When are they going to change this? When are they going to be like, they did that with Monken. They did that with Bennett. Their offense was fun and exciting and unique. And granted, I agree that Monken was sort of the top of the food chain in that department. And like what Buster Faulkner, a Monken acolyte, is doing at Georgia Tech is utterly fascinating. Just watch them pre-snap. It's so much fun. And it's very creative. I think the truth is in the middle. Like I think they're probably not as innovative as Georgia fans want them to be, but I think they're far more productive and efficient than sort of the critics want them to be. Like what team I'm not worried about, David? Georgia. I'm not worried about Georgia. Yeah. Like at worst, they're like 9-3, and that's if everything goes wrong, and that means they're still capable of beating every team on their schedule. So long-winded answer, of course, by me, but I think the answer is absolutely. They've never been closer at this stage of the season. What does that mean on the field in November 1st? I don't know. But if you look at the schedule, kind of, you said favorite game. One of the things that is lost in expansion talk and house settlement talk and NIL and portal and all this stuff that people like to complain about. And the new conferences, certainly the SEC is the best version of expansion because it's geographically and culturally attached, is the new stuff we get. The new stuff we get is awesome. And yes, people are frustrated by losing some of the old nostalgia and tradition and sort of stuff that comes with old college football. But like Texas at Florida in a conference game with two teams that could be top 10 at this time, that is a new thing. That's a new element of college football that would never have existed before. And that is, forget last year's score and how the game played out. Look at that game this year, and I don't know how, if you are an objective observer from a different fan base, that you can't look at that game and go, I cannot wait to see what that looks like. And even just like from a uniform standpoint, like the all white Texas with the Gator home uniforms, like that's a great helmet game. And so it's just like, it's the two teams. Frankly, what I think about when I think of that game is like how they never lined up in their heyday. Like, and I'm talking mid-aughts, right?
Yeah,
when Vince Young in Texas and Mac Brown and Urban Meyer and Tebow, they never got to each other, and they could have
almost in 08.
I know, and they could have played some extraordinary games, but they never really got to each other, and so I think it's. Like now that they both seem like they could be up again, like Texas is clearly up, but Florida could be too. That's a great, prestigious, historic rivalry game that's never really happened. Yeah. So those are the kinds of things that I'm excited about. Like as a Tennessee alumni, I'm not excited about playing in Florida because, I'm 42, and the last time they won there, I was in college. So there's that one. At A&M is going to be really fun just because A&M could be so good this year. They're a total wild card team. Yeah. The road. I mean, this schedule is brutal. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys. It's just that is the difference between probably what keeps them out of the playoff is probably the schedule. If you're pointing to one thing, like Florida could be, I don't know, like on an EA video game scale, like they could be like a 91. Right? Like they're not a 99. Yep. Like they're not Texas. They're not Georgia or Ohio State. They could be a 91, and that's generally good enough to get you into the top 10 and to win 10 games. But if your schedule's so hard, you end up finishing as an 87. 9-3 might not get you in. So.
One more thought from you, Braden. I know you got to go. Stephen Lassen, your colleague there, had a cool segment in there, the Sunshine State Intrigue. Now, we talked about Miami a little bit earlier, but this is about Florida, Miami, FSU, and it's been 10 years since one has reached a college football playoff, and that being Florida State, of course. You talked about Miami earlier. Florida State, like, what? I mean, what? How do you view a team that had that much success 2 years ago, falls completely on their face, and they're kind of an afterthought right now? And it happens so fast.
Yeah. So I think you do have to caveat that you've never been in the playoff. 13-0 in a 14 playoff.
Yes.
You got to admit that that's a hell of a team. And this will also, I realize this is also pandering, but that team had no business without Jordan Travis being in the playoffs. So this whole oh, Florida State got screwed. It's like, well, who else are you going to screw then if you're going to take them, if you're going to put them in the playoff? Frankly, I think Georgia was better that year, and Georgia's the team that got screwed out of the playoff. And it's with Georgia actually that year. That would have been one of those years like Ohio State last year, where if you put Georgia in a 10-team playoff or 12-team playoff, and they're like the 6th seed, that ain't the team you want to play. So all that being said, Florida State is, and honestly, now that I'm thinking, like, this experiment could not have happened at a more likely place than Florida State. And maybe this is insulting to Florida State. I don't know. But Florida, if there's going to be a program that's going to try to quick fix stuff, that's going to try to sort of like glitz and glam their way, or like big shiny object. I don't even know. It's like the opposite of the patience and investment in the culture. Like that we're so Florida State that we can go get good enough players to go 13-0. But we're also so Florida State that we can immediately win 2 games in a season. And I think that is as Florida State as it gets. It's like how far away is Tallahassee from Auburn? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that far away. And Tallahassee and Auburn, there's a reason that those 2 fan bases and those 2 programs kind of function the way they do. And so it's an experiment because Norvell was considered, because I love the Gus Malzahn hire, by the way. I think that's going to bring some stability and consistency to the offense that they just have not had, some physicality, the running game. I think they're clearly going to be better this year. So are they a 7-win team? That's kind of where I would put them. So clearly huge improvement, but a far cry from the year before. It's an experiment about what Norvell really is and what his philosophy is. And it's, Billy Napier, for flaws and for all of the faults of the strategy, it's slowly been working. It requires certain things to work, but it's working. Norvell, it's like he's, let's try this. Let's try that. Let's try this. Let's try. And I think you've got to figure out at Florida State, Florida, and LSU's another one, because I think Brian Kelly's doing the same stuff, trying to figure out the right blend of strategies. You've got to build in with true recruiting first and foremost. Like, you've got to do it that way. Then you can go to the portal and you can supplement with pieces that make sense when they make sense at the right time and for the right amount of resources. And so I think Norvell is just moving knobs. Like, you're just twisting knobs. You're like, okay, portal over here. Okay, NIL over here. Okay, keep the players here. Okay, we need to recruit in-state over here. We need to recruit, you're turning knobs of where you focus your resources. And I just think he's up there like going crazy. He needs to
Wizard of Oz behind the curtain.
Yeah, and I think he just needs to be like, all right, this got me 13-0, but it also got me 2-10. And I've got to sort of slowly settle into something a little bit more cohesive and sort of stable. And so he was lauded as one of the best portal coaches in the country. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to sort of figure out, like, is that really who he is? Is that really what Florida State should be? Are they Ole Miss? Or should they be more like a Florida, more like a Georgia, and try to build a little bit slower? Like, Miami is a little bit more like that too, like the other direction. And so do you want to be more like Miami, more like Ole Miss? Or do you want to do things maybe a more traditional way? And at Florida State, I would argue you have the resources to do it more traditionally. You should be able to say, now we're going to dominate on the recruiting trail. Then we're going to supplement with 20 to 25% of our roster through the portal, and it's going to be the pieces that contribute in the top 50 of the roster. So it is an experiment, and I have no idea what's going to happen long term. I think they're much better this year because I trust Gus Malzahn to do really good things with the offense. Is that make them a 10-win team? Like, it's Florida State. I guess I wouldn't be surprised, but like, but I think having that, I think we have them like 8th in the ACC, 7th in the ACC. Also a very interesting middle pack in the ACC. A lot of interesting teams in that sort of like 4 to 12, 10 range in the ACC. I think they have a chance to be among the better teams in that group. How much better is the question? I would have them at like 7 wins, 8 if things go right, 6 if things go poorly. But that's still a major step forward from last year. But like, I mean, heck, man, you couldn't be any worse. So
yeah. Braden, man, thanks. Athlon Magazine, Athlon Newsstands. Braden, let everybody know. I know catch you on the Athlon Pod, 440 Sports, your podcast there, talking SEC football. Let everybody know if they want more from Braden Gall and all that good college football SEC talk where they can get it.
Yeah, SEC Football Live, 440 Sports covers all things Nashville. So if you happen to be a diehard Titans fan or Predators fan or whatever, you can check out the work we do there. But mostly SEC Football Live is the show you guys will probably care about. We talk nothing but SEC football every week, every episode. During the season, Stephen Godfrey is my host. In the offseason, we try to do a lot of trips around the conference and sort of take people to different areas. It's a lot of fun. It's on the 440 Sports Network, the YouTube page, the podcast app of choice. So just search SEC Football Live and you'll find it. You can get to me across all the socials. It's 2025, so I'm less active on the socials, but you can get to me there. I still like having conversations with normal people. So if you want to be a normal person, please come on over and hang out. We'll discuss things like how many yards DJ Lagway is going to throw for or whatever. And just know, come hang out and subscribe because I am anti-Miami and Florida State right now and pro-Florida right now. I can't promise that I'll have the same opinion next year, but right now I'm pro-Florida and anti-Miami and Florida State. So come on over.
Hey, always the claim of fame is 2008 Athlon being the only one picking Florida to win the national title.
Hey, I'm glad that the one market still remembers that.
Braden Gall, everybody, joining us right here on Gators Breakdown. Braden, thanks, man.
No, always a pleasure. Good to see you.